I'm not done killing Muslims yet.
السلام عليكم، حياكم الله. هذا فيديو مختلف عن محتواي. اليوم أنا مع هذا الرجل ريتشارد ماكيني. تخيلوا أن هذا الرجل في يوم من الأيام كان ناوي يقتل المسلمين عبر وضع قنبلة في أحد المساجد، والآن أصبح أخونا مسلم، ومو بس كذا، رئيس للمركز الإسلامي في مدينته. واليوم إن شاء الله راح نسوي معاه هذه المقابلة. بسم الله. السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام.
أخي ريتشارد، أول شيء شكرا لاستضافتي وشكرا لتقبلك هذه الدعوة الكريمة. متى كانت أول مرة تعرف شيء عن الإسلام والمسلمين؟
Probably when I went to Saudi Arabia back in 1990 when Saddam had invaded Kuwait, and we spent a lot of time in Saudi Arabia before we actually went north.
Yeah.
So that was my first encounter, really. Up till then, I really didn't even know there was a such thing as Islam. You know, now everybody knows about Islam or knows that there is an Islam, but back then, no. Of course, being an American, and no matter whether you're American or not, when you go to another country and you see some of the customs and the culture for what it is, everything seems kind of weird, yeah. Right? I remember driving down one of the streets. There was two men walking, holding hands, and their wives were behind them,
yeah,
walking together. And I was like, "What's that about?" To me that was weird, right? I didn't really understand it. I mean, there was so many things that just come up to me when I was there that we were basically told just stay away because we didn't want to offend anybody because we would.
You don't understand the culture,
right? Especially with the women all covered up.
Yeah.
Being an Americans, we're gonna stare.
Yeah.
And that is highly disrespectful, right? You don't do that. But we don't know. We're just like, why is she all covered? That's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
كيف بدأت كراهيتك للمسلمين وماذا كان يغذيها؟
That's actually a long explanation. There's no short story to that. When I was in the military, and a lot of people, they'll want to point a finger at the military for causing that hatred. The military did not cause me to hate Muslims. They were there for me to do a job. It just so happened that some of the people that were my enemy happened to be Muslim. So developing a hatred for all Muslims was all my doing. I think I was looking for an excuse. And at the time, the common enemy was Islam, with most of the world. Had developed that and grew that to where every Muslim was my enemy. No matter whether they come off as being very good people or bad people, it doesn't matter because in my mind they're all bad people. I think one of the mantras that at the time was very much used was all Muslims are terrorists and all terrorists are Muslims. And that is so far from the truth, obviously. But I had grown that to where I actually would explain it to certain people early on that it was like another organ in my body, this hatred. And I saw myself as a surgeon who was going to eradicate the cancer that was Islam from the world. And like I tell people now, there was so much ignorance involved with me that caused this hatred. I was full of hate. I just was. It's a learning process, and that's right now I call my movement from hate to understanding, because it's not about somebody loving the religion or somebody becoming a Muslim. It has nothing to do with that. It's about people understanding what the religion is really about, and the fact that these evil things that happen with people who may be Muslims is the individual, not the religion. And that's what I try to bring on. We here in America, I mean, we have several Christian radical groups. I don't even feel comfortable in a room full of those people. I remember seeing a picture from like the 20s. It was the Ku Klux Klan. had their hoods over their faces. They were in maybe a school auditorium or something, and they were on a stage. And over the stage was a banner that said, "Jesus saves." Now, you know, being a Muslim, we have deep love and respect for the Prophet Jesus, you know, Islam. But to have that there, that was just, I see it now as an absolute contradiction. It's a contradiction because Christians, you know, believe that, you know, the Prophet Isa was the Messiah and Son of God and all that, and that's fine. That's, you believe what you want to believe. But to make that statement and then have a hate group underneath, come on, man. You know, this doesn't make any sense.
هل تغير انطباعك عن المسلمين عندما ذهبت إلى أراضيهم للقتال؟
If anything, that made my hatred more.
More. Oh, okay.
Well, because, I mean, so I couldn't differentiate because I wouldn't allow myself to differentiate between people and religion. To me, it was all the same, right? So it's not that these people are trying to kill me because of politics and because of geopolitics and because of this and that and their own liberations and all this, that, and the other. It wasn't because of that, it's because they're Muslim. They're trying to kill me because they're Muslim. That's what I believed, right? So then I was injured in Iraq in 2006, and it caused them to medically retire me, which I had in over 20 years, and they just said, "No, it's time for you to go," kind of thing. I remember telling them that I'm not retiring, I'm going back to Iraq. And they said, "Why do you want to go back to Iraq?" Right? I mean, it was a pretty bad place at that time. I mean, it still is not a good place, but I mean, it was a really bad place at that time. I said, I looked him dead in the eye and says, "I'm not done killing Muslims yet." That's the hatred that I had. Well, if I wasn't getting out before I made that statement, I was definitely getting out after I made that statement because they didn't want me around anymore.
ما الذي حدث بعد نهاية خدمتك وعودتك لأمريكا؟
So I came back. I mean, I had enough money to get by. I didn't really need to get a job. And I mean, I was getting these benefits from my retirement, from the Veterans Administration for disability and all that stuff. So I didn't have a lot to do. So I just sat and my hatred just built more and more because now I'm seeing, and they were always there, but I never noticed them. But there's these Muslims all over the place. What are they doing here? You know? And so my hatred even intensified even more to where I had said, enough's enough. I'm going to do everything I can, again, to rid the world of these Muslims. And I'm going to start in my own hometown. And that's when I devised a plan and built a bomb to blow up the Islamic Center in Muncie, Indiana.
كيف بدأت فكرة صناعة القنبلة؟
Well, I had learned how to make an IED when I was in Iraq. It's not very hard. Through a friend of mine who worked with the explosive ordnance disposal. He said, "Hey, you ever wonder how they put one of these things together?" I said, "Yeah." So he showed me, right? So I had the knowledge. It was just a matter of getting the stuff I needed, which, you know, I took my time. So it was about 3 years that I had this plan ongoing. No one knew about it. It was all me. A lot of it was arrogance because I wanted this to be my thing, right? And some of it was the fact that, you know, I knew just from watching movies and stuff that the more people that know about this, the more of a chance I'm going to get found out before I get to do anything, right? So I was like, nobody's going to know. So 3 years, I get what I need, I put it together, and I wait. I was waiting for Ramadan, that the year of 2009, which was a month or two before I actually stepped foot into the Islamic Center. And I was gonna detonate it on a Friday because I knew they would all be there. It's Ramadan, it's Juma, you know. I make the joke, I used to say it's like, you might not see most of the Muslims throughout the year, but during Ramadan, they're all there. It's kind of like Catholic Mass for Christmas. They all show up. You might not see them any other time of the year, but they'll be there then, right? And that's what I tell people. So I knew I would get the most people. It was a solid plan, I think. I don't know, but alhamdulillah, it never happened.
لما خططت لوضع القنبلة في المسجد، هل فكرت في الأضرار الجانبية للمباني المجاورة؟
It's a good question. So when I originally came up with a plan, I tracked down where the Islamic Center was, right? And at the time when I first initially building this plan, it was in a house. It was in a residential neighborhood that the community had got together and they built a house, or they took over the house that just for the purpose of a masjid. Nobody lived there, right? It was just a masjid. But it was in a residential area right off of Ball State, right? And I was like, I can't do it here because there's too many Americans around, right? Yeah. Okay. So too much collateral damage. But I said, I'm going to keep going with my process and see what else works out for me. Well, then they had moved. They had bought a building kind of off the beaten path. In order to get to it, you kind of you really need to know where you're going to get to it because it's not just straight shot. But they had bought this building and it was kind of out. There was I think it's a dentist's office. It's on the other side of the parking lot. Yeah. There's a Goodwill. I was trying to do some creative thinking with this bomb and the placement of it and everything else like that. And I was thinking, well, I'm going to get minimal collateral damage, right? And Friday afternoon, there probably is not going to be a lot of people at the dentist's office. There might be a few, but just because it's a Friday afternoon, people are at work, blah, 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 and so I'm thinking, okay, maybe. If not, then I said, well, then I'll have my own martyrs. Right? Oh. That's the way I looked at it. I said, and I thought building an IED was poetic justice because that's what was killing all my friends, So I had went there long before I actually went inside and had found a place to put it, made the plans, found a place that I was going to be to detonate it because I wanted to see it. So I wanted to be but far enough a distance away to where I'm not getting hurt because I already know I'm going to get caught. I already know I'm going to get thrown in prison and eventually executed because this is against the law. I understand that. Even though I felt it was right, I knew I would be punished for it. And I was okay with that. Because I was making a stand. And that was, to me, and to this day, it's still important for us to make a stand, right? Yeah. Not to stay in the background, not to stay in the shadows. Then, eventually I had, through my daughter, because of her not understanding why I hated Muslims so much. I went in there I actually went in to visit on a Friday because I knew most of them would be there.
So the story was that your daughter were telling you about Muslim colleague at her school and you lost it. What happened that day?
I got very upset because I saw it as I failed as a father. Our job as fathers, right? Protect our wives, protect our children. That's what we do, okay? And that goes cross-culture, okay? That's what we do. I thought I failed, but I knew she was in a position where she didn't understand. She was young too, and I had to get her the tangible proof because she wasn't going to be somebody that I was just going to tell, well, here's what they do. They beat their women. They kill us because we're not Muslim, and just go on and on. I knew she wouldn't understand that, so I wanted to get her some actual tangible proof. Best place to go is the source, so that's why I went.
What happened in the mosque?
So I walked in. I was there early. There was only one other guy there, huge African guy, right? He actually played pro basketball in the 70s here in the United States, right? Very interesting person. And I looked at him. He was in the shoe room. So as soon as you walk in the door, there's a shoe room off to the left, right? And I look at him, and he looks at me, kind of knew I was lost or like, why am I here? He said, can I help you? Smiled at me. Said, can I help you? And I says, yeah. I want you to teach me about Islam. He said, well, how long you got? I said, I got a couple hours. He's like, well, we'll give it a shot. So I ended up setting through the Juma service, the khutbah, and it was a great message. But in my mind, I'm like, they're only saying those things because I'm here, right? They're going to be sacrificing people downstairs in the basement here after this is all over, right? I mean, that's what I'm believing, right? Stupid. Then after the service, I get introduced to another guy, and we sat on a couch. There was a couch at the time in the library, and he asked me, this is what I tell Muslims today. I said, this is the best thing you can do. I says, if somebody comes up to you and they want to know a little bit more about Islam, hand them a Quran, tell them to read it, come back and find you when they have questions, right? And I was just amazed because that's what he told me. I was just so, oh my God, it was like Christmas. It was like Christmas to me, right? It was like, it was the best gift ever because to me, the Quran was the holy grail to evil. And They gave me a copy of it from them. So, you know, it's not like I went to the bookstore and bought one. It's from them. So it's got to be authentic, right?
Yeah.
And then they said they'll explain it to me. I was like, oh my gosh. That's when a guy who I actually end up becoming very good friends with, he's in the film, Dr. Sabir Barami. He comes up and he sits on the floor and he hugs my leg and he cries, talking about the love of Islam. For what reason, I have no idea. This is why I tell people there's a lot of things about this story I can't explain, because I truly believe this was Allah's work at hand. Because this guy didn't have any reason to come up, hug my leg and cry. He had no reason for that. Wow. This guy's serious, you know? And so I went home, read the Quran, and I read. I went back on YouTube. Back then, they still had the bad videos on YouTube, right? So I'm watching the bad videos, and I'm watching the scholars, the good videos, the Omar Suleimans, the Yusuf Estes, Yado Kader, listening to these guys, and I'm using the Quran as my reference on what's going on here. And I'm seeing that the bad videos are depicting stuff that I can tell may have been taken from the Quran, but totally flipped around. I'm going to make it say this because it fits my agenda, right? When that's not what it meant in the first place, right? And so through talks with the people, I also tell people, I said, well, it wasn't Ramadan, so I was actually there more than most of the Muslims were, right? Because I was there all the time. And it was really blowing them away because they're like, are you going to become a Muslim? I was like, no. See, these people still don't know what I had planned. I'm just somebody who's curious. That's how I introduced myself, and that's how I conducted myself. So I told him, I said, no, I'm not going to become a Muslim, man. I try to play it off as best I could when really I just wanted to like hit somebody with a chair or something, you know.
And during that time, you still have the idea of...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then finally, through some things that happened personally with, especially a dream I had, I gave in. I believe I accepted the path that Allah wanted me on. And I ended up becoming a Muslim. So I went to two of the brothers, older brothers, elders, and one of them was Dr. Barami, and one of them was Dr. Benkatu, both more or less founders of the Islamic community there in Muncie. And they were standing in the doorway of the prayer room. And I went up to them, I said, brothers, I want to take Shahada. I want to become Muslim. True story. Very funny. They look at each other, and they look back at me, and simultaneously, they both say, nah. And I'm like, so I had to laugh because I'm remembering the stories of, convert or die and all that stuff, right? And so I tell them that, so I look at them and I said, but why? And they were very, very, very pleasant and said, brother, you have a lot more to learn. Okay, that's a legitimate response. Yeah. I looked them back in the eye and I said, but don't we all? They looked back at each other. They looked back at me simultaneously. All right, let's go. And I took Shahada. MashaAllah. That was great. That was just the funniest thing to me. It's like, man, they don't even want me. Yeah. So, yeah. My impression of Muslims was the people that were shooting at me, right? Yeah. And I think anybody can understand that. If that's the only experience I have with these people from this religion, then that's what I'm going to think, right? But as I'm reading the Quran, because I never read the Quran before, as I'm reading the Quran and I'm putting things together, I'm like, these people here in Muncie are actually trying to live their life as best they can in accordance with what the Quran says. But I can pick out several different things in the Quran that it says not to do that the people that were shooting at me are doing. So I had to basically acknowledge the fact that the better example of what Islam truly is are the people here in Muncie, not the people there.
كيف كانت ردة فعل زوجتك وابنتك بعد إسلامك؟
So my wife was a different wife at that time. I feel so bad for her now because of the things that I put her through with my hatred. As she even said in the video, she had to divert where we were going because if she saw like a Muslim woman at the grocery store, I would walk by them and say something very hateful, very disgusting. That was who I was. I'm like most husbands. I don't tell my wife anything. right? And so she didn't know. She was getting nervous because she knew I was going to the mosque. She knew I was reading the Quran. So she actually thought that I was planning something because she had no idea. She had no idea that I was about ready to detonate anyway. She had no idea. She just knew I hated Muslims. And so I went home and I plopped down on the couch. This is after Juma, after I just took Shahada. And she looks at me concerned. She's like, so is everything okay? I said, everything's great. Big smile on my face, right? I said, everything's great. Good to hear. She goes, so how did it go? I look at her and I says, I'm a Muslim. And I said, I took Shahada today. And she goes, you show what? And then she was silent for a while because her brain, you could tell she was thinking. She looked at me and says, well, I'm going to tell you something right now. I'm not putting anything on my head. And I just kind of looked at her blank face and said, well, you're not a Muslim, so I don't really consider that an issue. So she's thinking some more, and she goes, and another thing, if you want more than one wife, I'm not going to be one of them. I was like, holy moly. Men that have more than one wife, I think they need to be on medication because that's crazy. That's just crazy. One is plenty. Went to the lecture with me, her and my daughter both. And she took Shahada there with my daughter. They both took Shahada at the lecture. Yeah, so she ended up converting back. There was a lot of things that went on. And honestly, I will accept a lot of blame for that. I was not the best of husbands, not even close, because I was still going through stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not fair to her. It wasn't fair to her, and I feel bad because I may have caused her to leave Islam. I ended up becoming president of the Islamic Center there eventually, and there's people within that faith that are very good people, and together we would be unstoppable. It's just a matter of getting us all together and to working together for the greater good. One of the major questions that's going to be asked us is, what did you do? You better have a good answer. And that's why I do what I do now. It's maybe my understanding of redemption. I'm trying to redeem myself for some of those bad things. You know, I can't change them, but I have learned from them.
ما الذي حدث عندما أخبرت الناس بخطة القنبلة أول مرة؟
I was in university later in life. I never graduated high school because I was involved in drugs. So I got kicked out of high school. When I was in the military, I got my GED, which is your high school equivalency, or your diploma equivalency. And I was in the military the whole time. Well, after I got injured, I had to learn to do something because I didn't have any job skills, really. So they sent me to college. And while I was there, you know, I'm over 40 years old now, and I'm a freshman in college. And so I had a different relationship with my professors than the 20-something students. You know, I actually had more worldly experience than most of my professors because their whole life had been in academia, right? Mm. So I was sitting in one of my professor's office drinking coffee with her, and we were just talking, and for some reason it came up. I don't know why, because I really never told the story. I still had not told my wife about it. Nobody knew. And I don't know why, but I did. I told her, and she was shocked. She goes, that story could change people's lives. She goes, you need to tell that story. And I said, really? You think so? She says, what are you doing after this? I said, well, I'm going to drink this coffee. I'm going to go home. She goes, no, you have my next class. You're going to lecture and tell your story. I was like, wow. So what happened there was one of the young men had heard me, and he's like, whoa, this guy knows how to build a bomb. And he's a Muslim now. Ooh. I need to call somebody.
See how the world changed?
So that's like, yeah, exactly, right? Next thing you know, Ball State police are coming, local law enforcement came, the FBI was there, they took a bomb dog through my house. And, you know, there was an investigation. Of course, this was after the fact. I had no evidence that I had built a bomb. I disposed of everything because, contrary to popular belief, I'm a Muslim now. I don't need a bomb, right? I mean, so I got rid of it, man. I got rid of everything, right? Because I don't need it. I was very, very honest with them during the investigation. I had nothing to hide. Then the people at the masjid started hearing stories. They didn't know. And that's when Bibi, being the person that she is, I love her for the sake of Allah. Oh my gosh, she's a wonderful person. I mean, she's just like, you see her and it's just like light, you know. She invites me to her house for dinner with her family and some friends. Yeah. And she comes right out. She's sitting across the table, and she comes right out and she says, so, this is what I heard. I was so ashamed sitting there, you know, I was just so ashamed. And so I told her the story, and I told her everything. And there was people around the table that were crying. And like I said, next thing you know, I end up becoming president of the Islamic Center, and I end up being asked to go here and go there because the story had hit the news. A Jewish guy from New York calls me up and says that he wants to make a video of me. It's all over YouTube now, right? And, you know, we got nominated for an Oscar, and, you know, I mean, I enjoy what I do now. I enjoy going out speaking to people. Inshallah, Tuesday I leave to go to Tulane University in New Orleans to speak. Supposed to meet Bibi there. She's speaking also. It's been great. It makes me feel good when I go places, and even when people are not friendly. And the reason, and I've been asked about this because I want to seek those people out. You know, people that are going to get in my face, say nasty things to me, because out of all the people in the world, I understand them best because I know where they're coming from, because I was that person. When I speak to a crowd, and I've spoken to as many as 5,000 people, my only goal is to touch one person. That's it. I don't care. I just want to touch one person and make them think. So there was somebody who responded to the video on YouTube comments, right? I read those, even though I'm told not to, because not all are good. Yeah. But this one guy, and this is what made it all worthwhile. This one guy said, and he said it very he used a lot of foul words. What he said was, if a tough guy like you can change the way he thinks about things, I guess I can too. That's it. That's all I want, man. That's all I want. I don't care if you become a Muslim or not. That's not my thing. Just change your thinking, man. Yeah. Alter your thinking, control your emotions, and delete negativity. We do it all the time on our computer. Yeah. Why can't we do it with ourselves?
كيف كانت ردة فعل زوجتك وابنتك عندما علموا بخطتك؟
Well, it's not even fair to say that was a very interesting night at my house that night because they didn't find out until they came home together, and FBI's outside the house, and I'm sitting on the front lawn in handcuffs. Right? That's when they knew. She was very upset. She was more upset, actually, the fact that she didn't know. And I explained to her why she didn't know, and I explained to her that there was a reason behind that. Number one, you're not at fault. If anything happens to me, you're okay.
So you're doing
There's reasons.
Protection.
Yeah. There's reasons why I didn't tell anybody. I think to this day she still has not forgiven me for that. And inshallah, she's a good person. She's a very good person. We still, because we have a daughter together, we still talk. Even though my daughter's in college now, we still, like I said, I was not a good husband. I really wasn't.
كيف أصبحت رئيسا للمركز الإسلامي؟
Honestly, and I took it for what it was. They had asked me. They were nervous because we were coming up on an election year for Trump. People really felt like Trump was going to be elected. This was when he was elected president. Yeah. And of course, a lot of minorities groups, Muslims, especially ethnic Muslims, were very concerned on how that was going to play out. So I was asked to be president, really, because I'm a white guy. It's a figurehead position, right? It's just like, oh, wait a minute. That mosque must be okay then. I don't know. You know, right?
هل سبق وزرت مكة المكرمة والمدينة المنورة؟
No. Inshallah. In a few months. Inshallah.
طبعا يا اخوان، اخونا ريتشارد ما عمره راح مكة ومدينة، فاللي عنده اي نية ان يساعده يحقق هذا الامنية يتواصل معي، وان شاء الله ان نفاجئه ونساعده فيها. شكرا جزيلا على اتاحة الفرصة لي، واتمنى لك التوفيق. جزاك الله خيرا.
جزاك الله خير.
بارك الله فيك.